listening. Ali.
G'day, I'm Greg Newson, naturopath, herbalist and nutritionist, and welcome to Time for Health. Today we're going to talk about something that I see quite often in the clinic, and that's people that come in and they're feeling flat, low energy, foggy in the head. Sometimes they're not sleeping properly and they're not really understanding why. Now, more often than not, it comes back to the liver. Now, those people may also suffer from skin issues such as hives, boils, rashes, itchy skin, or their skin's just not looking as clear and as healthy as it used to be. Their digestion may be heavier, they may be more bloated, especially after a fatty or a really heavy sort of meal. Their stools may be slimy or smelly and oily, and they float on the surface, and more often than not, alcohol. Yeah, they don't tolerate it very well. It knocks them for a six. They have half a glass and they feel off with the fairies. Now, on their own, these symptoms, they don't mean much, they don't seem like much, but when you group them together, you start to see a pattern forming. And that's where I start to think about the liver. Because most people only associate the liver with alcohol, but in clinic, we're looking at something very different. What we're looking at is how well the liver is actually keeping up with everything coming in. For example, anything that you ingest, anything that you inhale, or anything that touches your skin has to be processed by the liver. Once it's in the bloodstream, the liver has to process it. And also we're looking at how well the liver is functioning to process and clear that rubbish, toxins, out of the system. So when the liver starts to struggle, you don't get pain. You possibly could actually, I digress here, you could get pain under the right rib cage there. But as a general rule, you don't get pain. You just get the fatigue, the poor digestion, the low energy, you're fuzzy in the head, the flat, all those things we mentioned earlier on. Now, when we talk about the liver, we're not just talking about one simple job. The liver is more like the body's control centre behind the scenes. It's constantly processing, filtering, and regulating what's going on. Every minute, blood is flowing through the liver from your gut, your brain, your muscles, your organs, and it needs to be cleaned up, processed, and sent back out. And this is where it gets interesting because the liver isn't doing just one thing. It's doing hundreds of jobs all at once. Obviously, it's a female component in our body because us males could never do 100 things at once. But again, I digress. Now, I'm not going to mention every job that the liver does. We'll be here for days and you'll be asleep and so will I. So we're just going to look at some of the main areas in where the liver plays a very important role. And the first one is hormones. Now, once the various organs have used the hormones, such as the ovaries or testes, those hormones head on back into the bloodstream and then they make their way to the liver, and the liver then grabs hold of them, starts to break them down and clear them out of the body. So if it doesn't, those hormones start to build up and then they can start affecting our moods, our fluid levels, our energy. And in women, for example, that in their fertile years, it can affect their period, and their period is generally a heavier period. So the day 1, 2, 3 or 5 can be a really heavy flow. That's a good indication that your liver isn't clearing the excess estrogen effectively out of the body. The liver also plays a very important role with blood sugar and energy. So what happens is when we have glucose and we get excess, there's a bit that goes to the liver and the liver converts it to a substance called glycogen. Now, when our blood sugar levels drop, there's a message sent from the adrenal glands. It releases a hormone called adrenaline. That adrenaline then tells the liver, hey, mate, turn that glycogen back into glucose, and the liver does that, and then our blood sugar levels rise. So if that's not working properly, obviously people think diabetes, but there's also that fatigue in the afternoon, that mid-afternoon crash, or the hangries, or the shakes if you don't eat. So if dinner's at 12 o'clock or lunch is at 12 o'clock and it's 2 o'clock and you haven't eaten and you're starting to shake and you're starting to get angry or irritated, it's just a good sign that your liver may be struggling a little bit. Now, the liver isn't the only organ that regulates blood sugar. Your pancreas plays an extremely important role, but your liver's its 2IC in regards to blood sugar. Now, here's something that most people don't realise. The liver is the organ that makes the cholesterol. We get about 25% of our cholesterol from the diet. The rest is made by the liver. Now, we go, oh, cholesterol, that's bad. Yeah, no, it's not. Cholesterol is extremely important. 25% of your brain is made up of cholesterol, so the fluidity between the brain chemicals, so the messages that get sent along rely on cholesterol, so they can go from point A to point B to point C. All of your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, are made from cholesterol. So is your anti-stress hormone, cortisol, and your blood-regulating hormone, aldosterone, all made from cholesterol. Cholesterol waterproofs every single cell in the body, so it keeps what's in the cell stays in the cell. It's an integral part of your myelin sheath. So all of your nerves that run out of your nervous system, they're surrounded. Think of a copper wire surrounded by plastic. That's your myelin sheath, made up of cholesterol. So you can see it's starting to become pretty important. Cholesterol is very important for the manufacture of vitamin D. And without cholesterol, you can't transport your healthy fats or your vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are your fat-soluble vitamins, throughout the body. So, yes, too much cholesterol in a damaged artery can cause plaque buildup, because what happens is if there's a little sore that starts to fester, so inflammation starts to increase, and a lot of times that can be brought on by an imbalance in methylation pathway in the body and a thing called homocysteine that causes a sore to occur on that blood vessel. And if that happens, the blood vessel's only like 100 millionth of a millimetre thick. We don't want it to burst, otherwise there's an aneurysm. There's a message sent to the liver, we need a Band-Aid. So the liver sends the cholesterol molecule there and it integrates into the artery wall. Now, if that's not stable, it can dislodge, especially if blood pressure goes up. Vitamin C is one of those things that can help stable it, but I'm digressing there. Now, what else can the liver do? Now, the liver is involved, obviously, in circulation and helps to maintain healthy blood pressure. For example, if your liver is a bit clogged up, people have heard of fatty liver, what happens is, I'll digress a little bit here, but your heart pumps blood, lungs, all that sort of stuff. It gets oxygenated, goes throughout all the arteries in the body and capillaries, and it feeds all of the organs and cells, and it takes away a lot of the toxins and metabolic byproducts, whether it be broken down cells, immune cells, hormones, any poisons and etc., back into the bloodstream. But once it gets from the capillaries and it goes to the veins, there's no pressure. So when you move and your muscles contract, that pushes the blood back up to the liver. Now, if the liver is a bit congested, so it's fatty liver, the cells, the hepatocyte cells, mightn't be as clear as they should be to do their filtering. They might have a bit of gunk build up there, like cholesterol that builds up in artery walls. Then the blood flow from the liver back to the heart reduces. So then the heart goes, oh, hang on a second, we need some more blood pressure. And it thinks that it just has to increase blood pressure and the liver will be okay. But a lot of times that's not right because the liver's congested. So we've got to decongest the liver. Okay, so a little bit of back history there on circulation and blood pressure. Now, the liver is highly involved in digestion. It produces a substance called bile. Now, bile is critical for breaking down fats. So think of a glass of water, you pour some olive oil in on top of it. There's a big film of oil that sits on the water. When you have fatty foods, the same thing happens in your stomach and your intestines. Now, the role of bile is to break that fatty food or that fatty oil down to microscopic particles that can easily be absorbed through the villi in the small intestines and go into the bloodstream, then to the liver, which needs to process it. And one thing I did forget when I was talking about cholesterol, bile is made up of cholesterol. Okay, so now bile also plays another extremely important role. It's what the liver packs all the toxins into to excrete them out through the bowels. Okay, so obviously bile is very important and it's made by the liver. And bile also has a laxative effect, so it helps the bowels work properly. So if it's not doing all of that, it is doing all of that, I should say, it's also got to take care of the nutrients that you eat. For example, when you eat food, and most people have heard of folate to the body is useless. They can't do anything with it. So the liver has to convert it to its active form, which is a substance called methotetrahydrofolate. Now, that's the active form that the body can use, and it does the same thing with all of the vitamins, okay? And it also converts some of the essential amino acids that we get, or all of the essential amino acids that we get in our diet, they can be broken down to non-essential amino acids. So if the liver's not working properly, you can take as much folate as you want, but if that process of that conversion isn't happening, or you can take as much B12 or much B2 or 3 or 4, no, actually, I was just going through the numerical alphabet. I actually don't know if B4 is I'm pretty sure it's not a vitamin. Anyway, I digress. So liver is very important for converting the nutrients we eat into forms that the body can use. And if that's not enough, it's also a very important ally to the immune cells or the immune system. So it filters out bacteria, byproducts, and old cells, which takes a load off the immune system because the immune system's always filtering out bacteria. It's always trying to get rid of bacteria, viruses, parasites, toxins. So it engulfs them, allergens, foods that we're allergic to, old cells, it engulfs them to eat them, to get rid of them out of the body. So the liver is helping take the load off that immune system. So when your liver's running well, you don't notice it. Your hormones are in balance, your energy's quite good, your digestion feels fine. But when the liver starts to fall behind, even ever so slightly, these processes that I've just mentioned, they just don't stop happening. They just don't run cleanly and as effectively as they should. And that's when we start to see the PMS type symptoms or the period type symptoms or mood changes in people or fuzzy thinking. They can't think properly. There can be a build-up of toxins and inflammation. So the liver also helps clear inflammation. That's inflammation, I should say, not information. And that's part of the role of the immune system. So if inflammation builds up, stiff and sore joints, cholesterol can slowly creep up, digestion slows down a bit, you have a bit of a food, a bit of a heavier meal, a bit of fat with your meal, and you're going to go, oh, I just feel a bit bloated. Look at me gut, I'm 6 months pregnant. And you start to tire. You start to get that blood sugar drop in the afternoon, that lower energy. Now, if your liver's struggling today, it's not going to show up tomorrow. This is an accumulation of things that happens over time. So let's go a bit deeper. Let's actually look at how the liver works and how it does its job, because it's not just about filtering things out. It's about actively changing and processing everything that comes through it. Every minute, nutrients from your food, hormones your body's made, metabolic byproducts from every single cell are all flowing to the liver or through the liver at the same time. And the liver's job is to sort through all of that. It decides what stays, what gets transformed, and what needs to be removed. Now, the easiest way to understand this is think of it as a 3-step process. Everything that needs to be cleared has to go through these 3 phases. So we've got phase 1. It's the first phase. This is the activation stage. What the liver does here is it takes chemicals, toxins, medications, old hormones and starts to break them down. Think of phase 1 like a big net or a big glove or a big net, and it's sitting there in the bloodstream and all of these rubbish can't pass through it, and it's taken down its own separate pathway back into the liver to be processed properly. So what the liver starts to do with these compounds is it starts to break them down. But when it breaks them down, they become more reactive, they become more toxic, and if not handled properly, they can damage surrounding tissue and even then spew back out into the bloodstream. Now, this is where phase 2 comes into play. It grabs hold of all of those nasty compounds and it neutralizes them. There's about half a dozen different specific pathways that the liver can put these toxic compounds down. Now, for example, there is the sulfation pathway. Now, this pathway relies heavily on sulfur-containing compounds. So we're looking at foods like eggs, garlic and onions, and your cruciferous vegetables like your broccolis, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, etc. And when there's enough of those in the diet, that pathway works really well. Then you've got the glutathione pathway. Now, this is one of the biggest antioxidant systems in the body. I'll digress a second here because an antioxidant is a compound that protects cells. For example, you have a bit of steel that's sitting out in the paddock, it rusts. That rust is what we would call oxidative damage or free radical damage. The same thing can happen in our cells. Obviously, we breathe oxygen, but any toxic compound that the liver brings in can damage cells. But what the body does is it binds that toxic compound to an antioxidant and that renders it harmless. Now, as I just mentioned, glutathione is one of the biggest pathways or the biggest antioxidant, I should say, within the body, the biggest antioxidant enzyme. That doesn't mean none of the others, like your foods-based antioxidants, are diminished. So the glutathione pathway is supported again with foods like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, etc., as well as avocado, and any nutrients that your body can use to make glutathione. So glutathione is made up of 3 amino acids: glutamine, cysteine, and glycine. Now, where do you get them from? Protein. Okay, generally animal protein. They come in vegetable protein as well, but animal protein is a better source. So if you've got those in the body, your glutathione pathway is going to be working quite well. Now, then there's another pathway. Now, this is a bit of a mouthful. It's called the glucuronidation pathway, but it's a really important pathway. It's one of your bigger pathways, but it's also one of your slower moving pathways, but it's extremely important for clearing hormones and toxins. So it relies on a variety of plant-based foods, so fruits and vegetables and fiber-rich foods. So it doesn't matter what they are, all of those foods help support the glucuronidation pathway, but I will go as far as this and say that there's certain citrus that are more beneficial than others. Grapefruit, now grapefruit always gets a bad rap, but grapefruit upregulates that pathway, as does lemons. Now, grapefruit, it can be the skin or the juice, same with the lemons. And then to a lesser degree, but still very important, your limes and your mandarins and your oranges. They contain a thing called glucuronic acid, and most people who have taken a supplement called calcium deglutarate, it's basically calcium bound to the glucuronic acid that's found in those fruits. Then you've got another pathway called the glycination pathway, and that really helps bind to salicylates. So things that are beneficial there is collagen protein. That's very high in the amino acid glycine, so supplementing with glycine also. Gelatin and slow cooked meats, bone broths, they all help feed this side of the detoxification. So when you look at it as a whole, it's not just one superfood for the liver. It's about having enough variety in your diet so the liver has the raw materials it needs to finish the job, or basically finish phase 2. Because if those nutrients aren't coming in consistently, phase 2 slows down. And then when phase 2 slows down and you've got speeding up from phase 1, you're going to have a backlog. You're going to have a traffic jam. And then you've got all of this reactive material sitting in the liver, damaging your liver. Now, while I'm thinking about that, there's a couple of things that speed phase 1 pathway up, down very quickly, and slow down phase 2. And they're things that people aren't going to want to know. The first one's stress, okay? Stress speeds up phase 1, slows down phase 2. Stress to the liver, stress to phase 2 is like a sledgehammer. The other one is alcohol. I hear people going, oh, that's not very good, but I suppose I could understand that one because everyone knows alcohol's no good for the liver. And the last one is the thing that people do not want to hear, and that is coffee. So caffeine, or I should say caffeine, speeds up phase 1 detoxification pathway, which then has the effect of having a slower phase 2. Okay, so if you've got liver problems and you're using caffeine to get through, or you're low energy and using caffeine to get through, as I spoke about in the last podcast, all you're doing is you're not really doing anything but borrowing energy. So you get because caffeine is a stimulant, and you feel better now. Or if I don't have my coffee, I don't go to the toilet. That's because caffeine, the body doesn't know whether caffeine is a friend or foe. So it upregulates those detoxification pathways, and it puts all that caffeine in a lot of bile, and it shoots it out into the intestinal tract. Now, as I mentioned, it is a laxative, and you go, oh, yeah, I've got to go now. There's my morning bowel motion. So just be mindful. I'm not bagging everything out here. But I'm just telling you, if you've got a bit of a liver problem, you think your liver's a bit sluggish, and we'll go through all the signs and symptoms a little later on of poor liver function, possibly deep breathing, calming yourself down, giving alcohol and caffeine a break for a little while is going to support your liver. Now, once phase 1 and phase 2 have done their jobs, we move into phase 3, and that's the elimination phase. So once everything's been processed and neutralised, the liver then moves it out. So it does it 2 ways. Some of it goes into bile that I just mentioned just a second ago with the caffeine, which moves out through the digestive tract and out through the bowels. and some goes into the bloodstream and to be filtered out by the kidneys and excreted in the urine. So if you look at these three phases, you've got phase one, which activates everything. It brings it in from the bloodstream, it captures it, it activates it. So phase two can neutralise it, and phase three eliminate it. Now, when you've got all of these three phases working properly, everything flows well. Toxins get processed, packaged up, and cleared out before they can cause any issues. But what we often see in clinic is that these phases fall out of balance, and that's where people start running into trouble. So a real common pattern, as you've most probably guessed, is phase one's working way too fast. So the liver's breaking things down too quickly, creating those reactive compounds, traffic jam that I spoke about, and phase two and three are not got enough nutritional support to drive them properly. So then you've got that build-up of partially processed substances, and that's when people start to feel ordinary, sluggish, bit inflamed, more reactive to foods, alcohol, stress. And again, it's not something that shows up as a clear diagnosis straight away. It just feels like the body's not clearing things properly anymore, and you just feel not as good as you did 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 20 years ago. So there are some classic signs and symptoms that can indicate that your liver isn't working at its optimal level and it's struggling a little bit. Now, I've mentioned a few of these, but I'm going to go through each one in a little bit more detail and explain why those symptoms or signs can indicate that your liver is not 100% happy. Now, the first sign or the first symptom, it's a quite common one, and it's seen quite often, and it involves the digestive system, especially after we've had a heavy or a fatty meal. Now, I've touched on this previously, but people will say that they feel really bloated or gassy or queasy or nauseous after eating a heavy meal or some hot chips or an oily type of dish. So what's actually happening, as we've said, the liver produces the bile, breaks down the fats and helps move waste through the bowels, that laxative effect. So if the bile isn't being produced properly, or it's a bit sluggish coming out of the liver or the gallbladder, fat just sits there longer than it should, and then it doesn't break down properly, and that's when things start to feel a little bit, that's not good, and you start to get backed up. And that's why those symptoms show up more readily after a rich or oily, fatty type food, because that's when the demand for bile is at its highest. Now, we've already touched on blood sugar, but that plays a big role with poor energy and poor sleep. For example, people can hit the wall in the afternoon, or they can wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning. If you get to mid-afternoon and you're struggling, you think, oh, I just need something sweet, or I just need something to pick me up, like a chocolate bar or a soft drink or a soda. What is happening is that your liver is struggling to regulate the blood sugar levels within the body properly, and you're going for a quick fix. And you're bypassing the liver because, as I mentioned earlier, the liver takes the glucose, it converts it to glycogen, and when the body needs it, it releases it as glucose. So if your blood sugar levels aren't more balanced and steady, and they're fluctuating quite rapidly, your liver can't keep up. Now, that can also happen at night time. So nighttime poor sleep can be a liver issue on two fronts. Firstly, the blood sugar. If your blood sugar levels drop throughout the night, that sends off alarm bells in the body, and there's a message sent to the adrenal glands. We're in trouble. The adrenal glands release adrenaline. Adrenaline comes knocking on the liver's door and says, hey, mate, time to wake up. You've got a job to do. And it does that. And when someone bangs on the door, the liver wakes up in a fright, and you generally do too. And then the liver gets busy and working and converting that glycogen back into glucose. While that's happening, you're wide awake. Now, the other reason the poor liver function can affect sleep is they've found that each organ has a time clock on it, right? So it's most active between certain times. So the liver is most active between 1 and 3 a.m. in the morning. AM is in the mornings, flip. But anyway, I digress. So if your liver is struggling to cope with the load and it can't do its job properly, you're more likely to wake up between those hours. Then there are skin issues. So what the liver does, the liver puts, as we've mentioned, it puts most of its toxins into the bowel and into the kidneys, or into the blood, so the kidneys can filter it out. It goes in the piddle and the poo. But if your gut isn't healthy and you've got things like leaky gut syndrome or you're constipated, those toxins and poo can filter back into the bloodstream, and it comes back to the liver, and the liver goes, "Oh my God, what are you doing here? Got rid of you yesterday," and it puts it back to where it needs to go. But if it keeps on coming back, the liver starts to think, hang on, this is not right. We're not eliminating properly through these, either the bowel or the kidneys. So it goes, what can I do? It goes, what's the biggest elimination organ in the body, or the biggest organ in the body? And that is the skin. And so it starts to push toxins out through the skin. That's when you can have things like rashes, hives, boils, itchy skin, ulcers, and that sort of stuff, because the liver is trying very hard to move stuff along. Now, improving liver function will improve skin issues, but you've got to look at the gut as well. If you're not improving gut function, and you've got that leaky gut, you've got that constipation, you've got that bloating, that pain, that gas, that smelly substance that comes out your back end, your gut needs a bit of help. So that works hand in hand with the liver. Another area that can indicate poor liver function is an inability to lose weight. Now, there's a couple of ways that this can happen, but I'll break the first one down to make it simple. Let's say your liver is trying to get rid of toxins, and I've mentioned it pushes them out through the skin, but that's not enough. It can't get rid of enough, and this recurring toxin keeps on coming back in the bloodstream. The liver goes, what can I do with this? It's toxic. I need to do something with it. So what it does, it deposits it into a fat cell, and that fat surrounds that toxin or that byproduct or that chemical, and it renders it harmless. Now, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years have gone by, and you think, beauty, I want to lose some weight. So off you go and you start exercising and you're rushing, and I'm not rushing, you're running around and you're doing weights and you're eating well and everything, and all of a sudden your body goes, great, we're burning fat. We're starting to use our stored energy. And so once it does that, once it starts to burn fat, those toxins come back out of the fat tissue and dump into the bloodstream. And the liver goes, really? Hang on a second. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. No one's given me a second thought. And you want me to process all this stuff? I don't think so. I haven't got the energy. And it'll switch off fat burning. It's just going, no, not doing it. Tools down, not working. So there's that reason. And another reason is that the liver is also responsible for breaking down, as we've mentioned, breaking down and clearing excess hormones, in particular estrogen. So if it's not doing that properly, those hormones can recirculate within the blood, and then they can then drive up fluid retention and enhance fat storage. So then that means weight loss becomes harder to shift. Then we've got our moods. Now, in Chinese medicine, they have linked certain emotions to certain organs. Now, a common one that we all know is the heart. So what's the emotion that's attached to the heart? That's love. Fear's attached to the kidneys, which is interesting because the adrenal glands sit right on top of the kidneys, and they're the adrenaline and cortisol producing hormones. And people that suffer a lot of fear and panic and anxiety, a lot of times it's to do with the excess adrenaline and excess cortisol. So the liver, what is the hormones that are associated with the liver? Angry, irritable, frustrated, annoyed. So that person's livid, which means that they're angry. Or going back to your grandparents' day, that person suffers from shit on the liver, SOL, right? That was, I don't know if anyone else heard that, but I'd heard that. Not that my grandparents swore, but they just basically, that person suffers from SOL, which means shite on the liver, which is quite interesting. Then if I go back and look at the leaky gut scenario and all that stuff filtering back into the bloodstream, but it basically meant that those people were angry or irritated or frustrated. And that happens for a few reasons, but obviously because the liver is trying to process all those hormones, toxins and broken down cells and metabolic byproducts, that puts more load on the body. Now then that also puts more load on the nervous system. So it isn't just about stress. When the liver gets overloaded, our tolerance becomes less and our reaction time becomes quicker. So people can get really explosively angry, or they can just flare up at the drop of a hat. A lot of times, that's a good indication of impaired liver function, but not impaired enough most probably to show up in a blood test, because when we see those elevated enzymes, that's basically 60% of the liver's struggling. There's a lot of, if you're 50%, you're not going to have an issue on the blood test that you get from the doctors. So they're not a very accurate test. The signs and symptoms, if we start to listen to it, our body is always talking to us. And it's those signs and symptoms that tell us where, or give us the clues to where the problem may lie. Now, on top of all of that, we've got things that affect our noggin, our head, such as headaches, foggy thinking, pressure in the head, dizziness. Now, think of those as a clearance issue. So the blood is being constantly filtered throughout the body by the liver, or goes through the liver, every drop of it. Now, if that process is sluggish, you get a backlog, and that can create a sense of pressure, particularly in the head. Now, on top of that, if the toxins aren't being cleared efficiently, they circulate longer. Now, the brain is very sensitive to those toxins, and that's where that heavy head, that foggy thinking, and those headaches can come from. Obviously, there's other reasons like headaches, dehydration, magnesium deficiency, and neck issues. Rule those out, and you've still got headaches or migraines, you're looking at a liver issue. One area that often gets missed, and that is tight neck and shoulders. Now, that can be a postural problem. So you're hunched over a computer all day, you're going to get tight neck and shoulders, you're not moving them. But if you take that out of the equation and you've just got this tight neck and shoulders, it's a good chance that the liver is involved, and it tells us that the liver's under strain, because you often get congestion through the upper body, and we've just mentioned the head. Now, the blood and the lymphatic system, the lymphatic fluids, are not moving clearly enough or properly enough throughout the body, so you can get that tightness and that neck, and that tightness in the neck and the trapezius, the traps, and the base of the neck and between the shoulder blades. So yes, it can be a postural issue, but can also be a circulation and drainage issue, and that then comes back to the liver. Now, a common one, a big one, and that is sensitivity. So sensitive to alcohol, sensitive to medications, and sensitive to smells. Now, as I've said earlier on, anything that you ingest, anything that you inhale, or anything that you put on your skin needs to be detoxified through the liver. So if someone, that perfume, it really irritates me, or I'm going down the washing powder aisle in the supermarket and it gives me a headache, or it makes me feel dizzy, or I really feel, it really knocks me around, that's straight away telling you your liver is struggling to process those smells. Now, you think, it's just a smell. I can tell you there's a lot of chemicals in those smells. It's different to smelling eucalyptus, scrunching up a gum leaf and having a smell of that. That's a completely different smell. That's a natural oil that the tree produces. The stuff that's in those washing detergents or those other stuff that you get in the supermarket, they're not natural. They're chemicals. Right? So perfumes, they're not natural. They're chemicals. Some people, it's petrol and diesel. That annoys them. So then you've got the things that you ingest. So some people can be very sensitive to medications, and obviously alcohol. If you have half a glass of alcohol or a sip of alcohol, or you go, that's gone to my head, that's telling us that the liver is struggling. It's one of the clearest signs. It's not processing efficiently. Now, people can have, I've just had one beer and I've woken up the next day and I feel like I've got a massive hangover. That's not that the one beer was the problem. It's the liver's ability to process it. And on top of that, if you have that alcohol, I've had a stressful day, I've just got to have the alcohol to calm down. You throw the alcohol and the elevated cortisol, which is your stress hormone, into the mix, which the liver has to detoxify, and you put that into the mix, half a beer would most probably give you a hangover. Then you've got the people that it shows up in a blood test, or they've been to the doctors and they've been told that they've got fatty liver. So the fatty liver, they'll just look at that one first. It's basically a storage issue. Now, the liver is constantly processing fats, either burning them, packaging them, or sending them out in the cholesterol. But if the load coming in is higher than what they can process, or that whole process of processing them, I hate it when I do that, sorry. Anyway, that process of processing them isn't functioning efficiently, the fats start to accumulate inside the liver itself. So instead of moving through, it gets stored in the liver. Now, over time, that starts affecting how well the liver can do its job. Everything starts to slow down a bit, the processing, the detoxification, the energy regulation. That's why people that have fatty liver, some people don't notice it, but a lot of people that when they have fatty liver, they feel flat. They feel heavy, they're not being able to lose weight, they struggle emotionally. Then a lot of times you will see people that come in and they have elevated liver enzymes. And the liver enzymes that are elevated are ones called ALT, AST, and GGT. It doesn't mean that the liver is actually working harder. It's a sign of irritation. Those enzymes live inside liver cells. So when they show up elevated in the blood, that means those cells are under stress and a small amount or a larger amount is leaking out into the bloodstream. So it's basically a marker that your liver is being pushed and it's not coping as well as it should. And then there is another blood result called ferritin. Now, this confuses a lot of people because ferritin is often thought about as just iron storage, but it's also a marker of inflammation. Now, when the liver is under stress, the ferritin can rise as part of that stress response. So when you see elevated ferritin without being a true iron overload issue, it's more likely that the liver is inflamed and it's not handling storage and regulation properly. So the fatty liver, the elevated enzymes, the high ferritin, they're all pointing in the same direction, that the liver is under pressure and it's storing more than it should, and it's just basically, it's tired, it's unhappy, it's not working properly. The good news is that in most cases, it's not permanent damage. It's just a functional issue, and by reducing the load on the liver and supporting how the liver processes and clears things, that can all be turned around. So when you look at it, it's not, say, 10, I hope that was 10, I didn't count, but anyway, it's not 10 separate problems. It's one system not processing, regulating, and clearing properly, and it's communicating to you through different signs or symptoms. Some people may never get headaches, fuzzy head, migraines, but they may be emotional, they may be angry and irritated, they may have, I feel queasy and sick after a fatty meal, or they may just go, I've got none of those issues, but my liver enzymes are showing up elevated along with ferritin. So everyone is different. But once we start to see those signs and symptoms grouping together, we've got a few of them, we know that the liver would love some TLC. Now, a question I hear quite often is, look, I don't drink alcohol, Greg. Why is my liver struggling? Alcohol is generally the thing that everyone associates with poor liver function, but it's a lot more than that. Our liver now has to work harder than it has ever worked in the whole history of humanity. And I'll explain why. I'll start with the food. Sure, for a lot of us, we may eat fruits and vegetables and grass-fed meats and wild-caught seafood, but a lot of what's coming in is processed. We're not just dealing with proteins, fats and carbohydrates. You're dealing with preservatives, refined sugars, damaged fats, additives that don't actually do anything for your body. And each one of those has to be processed. That means more enzyme damage. That means more antioxidants are required, and more work just to clear something that shouldn't be there in the first place. Sure, some of those foods taste nice and they're great, but they place a greater demand on your liver. Then you've got chemicals, pesticides in foods, cleaning products, plastics, car fumes. You're breathing it in, you're absorbing it through your skin. They may make us look good or help us do something quicker, but your liver still has to process them. It's got no choice. Then we layer in medications and supplements, even the good ones. anything that enters the bloodstream has to be broken down and cleared. So you're now asking your liver to process food, plus environmental chemicals, plus medications, plus supplements, all at the same time. That's where those detox pathways that we spoke about earlier, the phase 1, the phase 2 and the phase 3, they start to struggle. They get pushed to their limits. Now, when there's this extra load, the liver just doesn't go, oh, I better work harder, I better clock in some overtime. It doesn't do that. It's going, oh my God, I need certain nutrients. I need B vitamins. I need certain phytonutrients. I need antioxidants. I need certain amino acids to do my job properly. And if I'm not getting them through my diet, I start to struggle. Sure, I can steal some from different parts of the body, but then that has its own ramifications. So as I said earlier, if phase 1, bringing all the rubbish into the liver, speeds up, and phase 2 and phase 3 slow down, that's when you can start to cause a lot of damage to the liver, but that's when your liver starts to really struggle and things start to back up. Then there's the stuff that adds a load without giving anything back. Artificial sweeteners, food colorings, fillers in processed foods, even in some supplements. Yes, some supplement brands contain fillers. Now, just ask yourself, how does a tablet get stuck together? There's something synthetic in there. And some people cheat a little bit and they have a bit of spare room in their capsule. They'll put a filler or an artificial ingredient in there to bulk it up. You look at powders. Powders a lot of times have flavours and sweeteners in there. The liver has to process them all. So it's all work for the liver and no benefit for the body. Now, add stress into that or on top of that. So when our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are elevated, our body shifts into survival mode. So when that happens, blood is directed away from digestion and bile flow slows down. So you've got less bile being produced and released, which means that the fats aren't broken down properly and waste isn't moved out efficiently. At the same time, those hormones, elevated cortisol and adrenaline, aren't being cleared properly. So they start to back up. Then layer in lack of movement, because lack of movement is the only thing, actually I should start that again, movement is the only thing that gets the blood back to the liver. As I mentioned earlier on, it goes to the heart, the lungs, pumps throughout the body, does all its job in the arteries and the capillaries, but once it gets into the veins, there's no blood pressure to push it. So that's when you move, your muscles contract, that pushes blood back up through the veins, back up to the liver. And then from the liver, then and off it goes back into the circulation again, back into the heart, cleaned and refreshed. And if you are not hydrated, everything thickens. So your blood gets thicker, your bile gets thicker, your lymph fluid gets thicker. Well, a bit of a tongue twister, lymph fluid. Anyway, and the lymph system, the fluid within the body, there is more of that in the body than the blood. And it all feeds into the bloodstream through the thoracic duct and then goes to the liver to be cleansed. So if that becomes thick and sticky and the blood becomes a bit thick and sticky and you're just not being able to flow through the liver as effectively as it should, things start to back up. Okay, now when you put all that together, that basically tells me you've got more coming in. You know, we just have to look at all the medications, we just have to look at all the preservatives, the additives, the processed foods that we have now compared to 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago. So more coming in, more needing to be processed, but unfortunately there is less moving out efficiently. And you've got that bottleneck, and it's not because the liver stopped working, it's just that it's under load and it's struggling and it has difficulty keeping up. When it comes to supporting your liver, you don't need to go and do anything extreme. No harsh detoxes, no starving yourself, no crazy protocols. What actually works is giving the liver what it needs and taking the pressure off it. So let's start with food, because this is where most of the work comes from. The liver relies heavily on nutrients coming in to run those detox pathways. So if the diet's lacking, phase 1 and 2 just don't keep up. It's as simple as that. Now, one of the easiest ways to improve this is variety. And the easiest way to understand a different variety is by eating a rainbow, not literally a rainbow, but the colours of the rainbow. So the different coloured fruits, the different coloured vegetables, they're not just there for their looks. They provide different antioxidants and different phytonutrients. And it's those antioxidants that help to neutralise the byproducts created during that detox process, as we spoke about earlier. Remember, every time your liver processes something, it creates oxidative stress, or that rust that happens on steel. Now, if you don't have enough antioxidants coming in, that stress, that oxidative stress, that rusting starts to damage liver cells. So you're not just supporting detoxification by eating a variety of colourful foods, you're protecting the liver while it's doing its work. Then you've got your cruciferous vegetables, your broccolis, your cauliflowers, your cabbage, your kales, your Brussels sprouts. These are big ones for hormonal clearance because they contain sulfur compounds which directly support phase 2 detoxification. So if someone's dealing with hormonal buildup from PMS, fluid retention, heavy periods, mood swings, these foods are ideal to help work behind the scenes to clear those excess hormones. Now, protein is another big one because the detoxification process is a binding process. The liver takes in toxins and it attaches them to amino acids so they can be removed safely. So if your diet is low in protein or it's got a lot of processed meats, that process, that detoxification process, that binding process slows down. So foods like eggs, legumes, nuts and seeds, grass-fed meats, wild-caught seafood, bone broths, they're not just healthy foods, they're actually literally providing the raw materials needed by your liver to clear waste out of the body. Now, I briefly touched on hydration a little while ago, but this often gets overlooked all the time. So I'm going to harp on it again. I'm that nagging person. Bile needs fluid to move properly. That's simple. It's a liquid. It needs fluid to move properly. So if you're dehydrated, that bile thickens. And when bile thickens, it doesn't flow well. That means fats don't get broken down properly and toxins don't get effectively removed either via the liver or through the bowels efficiently. So things just sit there. So hydration, really important. People think hydration is good for the kidneys. It's also extremely important for your liver and your colon or your intestines. So instead of going, oh, I really like a chocolate bar, if you're craving chocolate all the time, you're deficient in magnesium. Just thought I'd throw that one in there. But you go, oh, I just want some lollies or sweets or something. Grab a piece of fruit, or make yourself a Trailblaze mix. Grab a handful of raw nuts, can be macadamias, almonds, pistachios, whatever you want, and throw in some sultanas, some goji berries, maybe some cranberries, throw in some coconut if you want that, and mix it all up and throw some seeds in there as well. And when you're hungry, grab those. So firstly, you're getting protein, you're getting fat, and you're getting sugar. And you're getting it in nature's healthy packaging. But by doing that, you've turned away from some sugary treat that generally will contain processed fats, artificial flavourings, colourings, preservatives, additives, all the stuff that your liver doesn't want. And all of a sudden, you've given your liver a whole heap of antioxidants. They come in the sultanas, the goji berries, the cranberries, the nuts and seeds themselves. You're really nourishing your body. And you don't eat too much of it because they're quite filling, but they satisfy that hunger. Now, I've already mentioned movement a couple of minutes ago, so I'm not going to go into that, but if you want to improve your liver function, you got to move. You can't sit on your bum all day and expect your liver to be working properly. Just keep on getting up, moving around, walking, go for a walk at lunchtime. If you're sitting in an office, do some walking before work, get up. If you're sitting at a computer all the time, and just do a couple of squats, walk around the office, come back, sit down. Any little bit of movement helps. Now, any patient of mine knows I talk about this all the time, and it's breathing, but it's not the breathing for calming the nervous system down here. Breathing actually plays an important role with the liver. Now, what it does, deep breathing moves the diaphragm, which sits right over the liver. So every proper breath actually helps move blood through the liver and improve the drainage. So it's like it massages the liver. So every time you deep breathe, I just said get up and walk and move, but deep breathing is also very important because every time we deep breathe, that diaphragm gives the liver just a gentle massage, which pushes some blood into it and then pushes some blood out of it. So it's quite simple, it's free, and it works. Now, sometimes that is enough for people to improve their liver function, but other times, especially if the liver's been under strain for a while, it's not enough. So that's when we rely on Mother Nature. We use Mother Nature's medicine, and that is herbs, to help support liver function. Now, there's many herbs that help improve liver function, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's a few ones that deserve a mention. First one is St. Mary's thistle or milk thistle. It is what we call a hepatoprotective herb, which means that it protects the liver cells from damage, and it helps to regenerate the liver. Now, the good thing about the liver, I actually haven't mentioned this, the liver is one of the only organs in the body, if not the only organ in the body, that can regenerate itself. So you can cut 3/4 of your liver out and it will grow back again. Not something I'd recommend you doing in the backyard, but if you needed to, because you had a problem, the liver will grow again. And St. Mary's thistle also helps in that process. There's another herb called Schizandra that comes from China, so very popular in Chinese medicine. And that actually enhances, it's very rich in antioxidants, but it also enhances phase 2 and phase 3 and to a degree phase 1, but mainly phase 2 liver detoxification. So it improves the cellular energy within the liver and it supports the liver or protects the liver once it's under chemical load. Most people have heard of this herb, or they've tried to kill it in their grass or their garden, which is a shame because it's very important. But that is dandelion, but I also understand you want your grass to look nice. So dandelion is very important to help promote bile flow. So obviously, as we mentioned, bile, digestion, toxin removal. So liver, along with globe artichoke, which is a vegetable, also very good to help improve liver function. Globe artichoke also helps to regulate cholesterol as well. And then you've got some simple herbs such as rosemary. Grows in the garden. Most people have got rosemary and they think, oh, I'm having lamb roast tonight, I'll put some rosemary on it. But having a rosemary tea or green tea, a good old green tea, they're both very rich in antioxidants. And antioxidants, as I've mentioned many a time, helps protect the liver from damage. Now, in clinic, I'll have different formulations that I can choose from depending what is being presented by the patient sitting in front of me. For example, if someone comes into me and they've got elevated liver enzymes, their ferritin's up, they've got fatty liver, or they're flat, they're brain fog, they're easily irritated, they react to things, alcohol knocks them around harder than it used to, or medications that don't sit well with them, that's when I will use Natrovital Liver Stress, generally 7.5 ml morning and night, and I'll most probably do that for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the person. Because the liver's not necessarily blocked up or struggling, it's just overwhelmed, it's just doing too much. So the focus here is taking the pressure off the liver, supporting those liver cells and the bile flow and helping it cope, I should say, with everything that's coming in. Now, alongside that, I generally use Natrovital antioxidant support because you've got to protect your liver while it's doing its job. So every time it processes toxins, hormones, alcohol, additives, chemicals, whatever it may be, it creates that oxidative stress, which is that rusting of cells that I mentioned earlier. Now, the role of antioxidants is that they protect cells from that damage, from rusting. They're like the galvanized paint. Now, if a patient has more along the lines of their skin is flaring up, they get their rashes, their boils, their hives, breakouts that don't settle down properly, they get itchy, especially at night time, or there's hormonal patterns that just don't improve, such as PMS gets worse, there's breast tenderness, there's fluid retention, the period themselves is quite heavy and clotty, or the tongue could have a yellowy brown coat to it, especially in the morning. When I see signs like that, I am thinking that the detoxification pathways are backed up a little bit. So for that, I'll use Natrovital Liver Detox, because what we're doing with that tonic is improving or balancing out or regulating all of those 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. And with that, I'll generally use Natrovital antioxidant support because we mentioned earlier on, antioxidants are very important to bind to those really toxic chemicals that are produced when phase 1 is active before they get into phase 2. Alongside that, I'll use Natrovital Green Cleanse, which is an algae and young plant rich chlorophyll mix that obviously contains antioxidants, so it complements antioxidant support, but it contains high doses of chlorophyll. Now, chlorophyll helps at a couple of different levels. Firstly, it has a binding effect. So when the liver's already processed those toxins and they've been pushed into the bile, chlorophyll helps bind to those toxins or those compounds in the gut, which helps prevent those compounds from being reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. So if we look at that from a phase 3 point of view, chlorophyll actually helps make sure that once those things have been processed, they actually get out, they don't come back in. It helps alongside antioxidant support in that phase 2 detoxification pathway, where it helps to neutralize those toxic compounds that cause oxidative stress. So I suppose you could say it's helping the back end process, where it's helping the binding to and carrying out of those compounds. And on top of that, because they're an algae and they're young plants, they are very nutrient dense. So they contain a great variety of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and other phytonutrients that help support liver function. One group of nutrients that often gets overlooked when we're looking at the detoxification pathways, the B vitamins. These vitamins are critical not just in the detoxification side of things, but in the chemical reactions that are happening within the liver. For example, in phase 1, as we know is where everything gets broken down, the liver relies heavily on vitamins B2, B3, and B6. Without those, this first step, this first phase becomes inefficient. And then when we look at phase 2, this where everything gets neutralized, one of the key detoxification pathways, or one of the key pathways, is methylation. And that methylation pathway depends on vitamin B12, folate, and vitamin B6. And if those vitamins aren't there, either in phase 1 or phase 2, the liver can't do its job properly. On top of that, there's the energy side of things, because all of this, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, requires energy. And energy in the body is in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Now, B vitamins are central to energy production. So if you're low in B vitamins, you're going to suffer fatigue. But more importantly, your liver's going to fatigue. So you just don't see poor detoxification. You can see fatigue, poor recovery, brain fog. Now, in situations like this, I will use Natrovital B Complete, which contains a variety of activated B vitamins, along with ashwagandha. And lastly, if someone comes in and they're bloated after fatty meals, they feel heavy after meals, they can be constipated, they can have sluggish bowels, their stools can be a whitish colour, or they can be slimy and greasy and smelly, that usually points to bile, or an inability to produce, store or release bile from either the liver or the gallbladder. And in that situation, I will then generally go to Natrovital Liver Plus GB support that helps stimulate that process so the liver can produce more bile and the gallbladder and liver can release it into the digestive system. So when you step back and look at it, it's not about throwing everything at the liver. It's about matching the support to what's actually going on. If it's overloaded, take the pressure off. If it's backlog, improve processing. If there's poor digestion, get bile moving. If there's a high toxic load, antioxidants. Fatigue associated with poor liver function, we're looking at B vitamins. So hopefully that has given you a greater understanding of how the liver works, why the liver is struggling in this modern society, and the importance of those phases, 1, 2, and 3, and detoxification. So until next time, this is Greg. Live life and laugh loud.
I will